Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, our subject is post-war Italian cinema. We're going to be seeing the 1953 production, The Vanquished, directed by Michelangelo Antonioni. It's an anthology film. In fact, only one of the sections is set in Italy, the other two in France and England. We'll be talking about that and many other things after today's screening. It's a pleasure to welcome back to City Cinematheque Professor Giancarlo Lombardi, an expert on Antonioni's work. Now enjoy this rare opportunity to see an early Antonioni, The Vanquished. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed this occasion to see a very early film by Michelangelo Antonioni, only his second feature film. It's quite an interesting piece, particularly if you know the later Antonioni. But there's a lot to talk about this, and I'm very pleased to have, once again on City Cinematheque, our good friend, Professor Giancarlo Lombardi. Giancarlo is the executive officer of the Comparative Literature program here at the Graduate Center, as well as a professor at the College of Staten Island. He publishes on 20th century Italian and 21st century Italian literature, film, and is has a booming reputation, I would say, in the study of international serial television, an emerging field in the academy that's very, very exciting. Welcome back, Giancarlo.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Okay.
It's always great to be here.
Good. So let's just start out with a little bit of the setting of the context of the Italian film industry and then of Antonioni. This film premieres in 1953 at the Venice Film Festival. So what's going on in Italian cinema at this moment?
It's really an interesting moment because, I mean, neorealism is alive and well, although it's changing and it's certainly becoming a bit of a formula at that point. By this time, of course, you know, Rossellini has made his major films. And at the same time, though, Antonioni has done something completely different. Antonioni and Fellini start their career pretty much at the same time. Mm-hmm. But whereas Fellini comes to it after having worked as an assistant to other directors and as someone who came from, from working as a cartoonist, it's instead the situation with Antonioni is completely different. He is a film critic. Mm-hmm. He comes to cinema as a film critic, and his first film, A Story of a Love Affair, bears the marks of neorealism, but it's already different from what we've seen until now, and already has a detection in it. Detection is already very strong. When we get to VINTI, we see a completely different type of film, and it's a film that, you know, that Antonioni himself had a very difficult relationship with, because it was certainly, the final product was certainly different from what he imagined it to be.
Right. So let's talk about this film and this also sort of larger moment of the kind of global interest in the industrial world that really stretches, you know, from Los Angeles to Tokyo to Rome to the UK, etc., about the problem of youth.
Yes.
And of it's a particular generational generational problem. So how do you see this film fitting in with some of those like global trends? Because you've got a local thing like neorealism, that's come out of the particular conditions of Italy, but then you've got this genre that all of a sudden appears globally, of the juvenile delinquent film, you could call it. Yeah.
You certainly have that, and certainly, you know, when Italians refer to this issue, the question of, you know, the generational malaise,
right.
They refer to Rebel Without a Cause,
right.
Gioventù Bruciata, burnt generation. And when they refer to this type of generation, they literally call it like that, Gioventù Bruciata. And there's so many movies being made on this subject. There are movies being made all over the world about this subject. There is certainly already something going on in Italy. Antonioni intervenes on this in what he imagines will be a very Antonioni-esque detached way. So the idea is to present three different real events that made the news. This falls within a tradition of co-productions that at that point was alive and well between France and Italy.
Right.
And the production company that puts together the film, that commissions the film, is Catholic, clearly Catholic,
Right.
pronouncedly Catholic, and the final intent is different from the one that Antonioni has. And the presence of the production company is really there in the voiceover that opens the film, that was completely different from the one that Antonioni had imagined.
Right. Yeah, so you've already used that magic word that some of us like, Antonioni-esque.
Yeah.
Okay. And so one of the interesting features of this film is that you have to wait a while in the film to get that sense that you've entered this very special world that is how Antonioni tells stories. So how do you see this? You know, there are some critics who really dislike this film later on, that have just said this is just a waste, etc. I have to say my opinion's a little bit different, because there's a way in which we can learn a lot from, I'm going to call them some texts, some movies that are less than coherent. And this is not a coherent film in all kinds of ways. There's all kinds of frictions going on inside the film between its internal elements. But there's a lot of fascination, in that as well. And it's almost as if the 3 episodes are in their own way a riposte to this framing device, saying, okay, you're going to nail this down, this is going to become moralistic, this is going to be as didactic, it's going to be something you can show to school kids, etc. And that's not what the episodes are like.
It's totally not. It's totally not. The initial idea was actually to have in the prologue a UNESCO session where the question of the burnt youth, this generation, was being discussed, and then the epilogue, the imagined epilogue of the film, was the image of all the delegates of the UNESCO boarding their own flights, their different flights, as they bore with them the images of what was happening and how they had to intervene in their own countries. This was all thrown out. The idea, it's certainly, the prologue of the film makes it, the prologue we know makes it completely different, but it is striking, as you were saying, in contrast with the 3 stories, because the 3 stories are Antonioni-esque in their detachment.
Absolutely.
So you already see what critics have called the dédramatisation of the presentation of the events.
The de-dramatizing.
Yeah, de-dramatizing.
He is one of the great anti-melodramatists of film history.
Absolutely. In spite of his of his other 2 films, the 2 films that had already come out by the time The Vanquished, the VINTI, finally comes out, because you were saying it's the 2nd film, but it actually comes out 3rd, because The Lady Without Camellias comes out before, because this film has so many problems with censorship and with getting it done.
Let's stop there just for a moment, because since, we have no problem showing this film, here at our university station, my smaller nieces and nephews, I have no problem them being in the room, so it's a little bit difficult for us to reimagine the degree to which this is a film that was subject to multiple levels of censorship. I want to talk about that for a second.
There was censorship at multiple levels, and not just at, at different national levels.
Right, yeah.
Because on one hand, you had what was going on in France. So the French episode is based on the famous case of the G3, which was, the murder of a kid during a partie de campagne, during a day in the countryside. And, by the time this movie was made, the families of the people involved were extremely active in trying to block it.
Okay.
To the point that the film itself The French episode was blocked in France for a long time, and this slowed down the putting together of the film and the presentation of the film, the launch at Venice. Right. Once it launched in Venice, and even before it launched in Venice, censorship was already intervening in terms of titles. So this film initially was supposed to be called Our Children, I nostri figli. Then it became Vietato ai minori, which is the equivalent of, literally means forbidden for minors, but it's really rated R.
Okay.
Imagine a film called
Right.
Rated R. And then it became Betrayed Youth, Gioventù Tradita. And then out of the blue, it became I Vinti. The censorship was, on one hand, in the French episode, they toned down the eroticism of the lines that the characters exchanged. A lot of the sequence, the infamous flashback sequence in the British episode is gone. This is extremely rare, by the way. A flashback sequence in Antonioni is extremely rare.
One more in The Passenger.
Exactly, that's
Okay,
the only
that's
one we'll see.
Yeah.
And and that will be a recurring flashback in The Passenger. Here you have it as the guy is telling his story. But some of the most vivid moments in that passage are left out. So the face of the woman after she's being killed, and the insistence, the persistence of the hands that strangle her are gone. But censorship is all over the Italian episode, to the point that the episode has to be refilmed or better repurposed.
Well, no, that's, I mean, so what we're talking about is edits within the French sequence and this, and what we're talking about is actually changing the thematics of the Italian, and the original, as which I have not seen but I have read about, is of course explicitly political.
Absolutely.
Because the protagonist is explicitly a neo-fascist.
Absolutely, and again, the original was to be a real story. The real story, the real event, ripped from the headlines. These 3 episodes were supposed to be ripped from the headlines. Was supposed to be the story of a man who was found dead in a boat with the Italian flag on him. Completely gone. The whole thing is gone. The whole neo-fascist aspect is gone. At the very beginning of the film, we see a siren and we see firefighters, but we have no idea what they're there for. Right. Whereas they are in the film, in the original film, they were there in reaction of what the guy had done, which was, he exploded, he put a bomb in a munition factory. The whole thing is changed, and as a result, it becomes, a guy who walks on the wrong side of the tracks. He does cigarettes contraband. Right. So they had to rush and film a few more things very quickly. I mean, the original premiered in Venice in September. The film was in the theaters in October, November, and then only in Rome, and then by the new year all over Italy. But they repurposed some other things. They redubbed the film, which is a problem because, some of these things don't really make sense as a result. I mean, the Italian episode as a result is a little bit of a Frankenstein. But all the political aspects are gone.
Right. No, it's very interesting because the whole film becomes societal critique and even including the psychological critique that shows up in the final episode. Yeah. But so the whole notion of this being a particular political post-war context, gone.
Gone. It's all gone, and it's really it becomes a movie where, in a way, Our Children, the original title, is the one that would have made sense, because it becomes a movie about responsibility of parents who didn't know their children.
Of point well taken, and even in the Italian episode, when she's lying over his body and saying, "What did they do to him?" You're saying, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! Not the right pronoun here," and that's part of the irony that goes through that. Also makes the film cold in a certain kind of way because there's so much irony. So let's now go to those things that are Antonioni. in this in this film. Let's start with this whole thing of the coldness of it. What's he after here? Because he was, as we both know, he was criticized for this, and part of his riposte again to that was, you're criticizing me for my cold treatment of these characters, where I'm saying that's one of the virtues of my film. So let's talk about that as a virtue and how it develops.
I think it has to do with the consideration that Antonioni has of character, of the role of character in a film, and by extension, the role that actors play in a film. I mean, to him, actors are objects, and characters are objects. They are part of the mise en scène. And I think that, allow me a flash forward to L'Eclisse. And the beginning of L'Eclisse, the opening sequence of L'Eclisse, has Monica Vitti playing with a frame that is empty and has 4 objects behind. And she assembles these 4 objects behind this empty frame that has no back. That's what he did. That's how he dealt with his actors. That's how he considered. Right. So, I mean, in a way, actors were asked to be cold because they were just part of a larger picture. And this is where this film is Antonioni-esque, especially the last episode, the British episode, has so much already of blow-up. Not just because it is set in England, not just because it is set in London, not just because we see tennis being played, but also because of the whole world that flows around the protagonists from the very beginning until the very end, the infamous scenes at the telephone booth. And that is already there. But on the other hand, you see the same thing going on in the French episode. In the French episode, both in the opening, in these houses that we sort of visit, almost in a Hitchcockian way, we go from the street into the house, into the open window. But then, in long takes that are extremely Antonioni-esque. So like the first huge long take of Story of a Love Affair, here is alive and well, and it actually goes contrary to the original plan. I mean, Antonioni never respected the screenplays. So, I mean, originally this had a ton of sequences, and it was cut. And it had a ton of shots, and they were cut. And they were made much longer, because the camera was following the characters. One would say that this is also a little bit of a neorealist affair. I mean, the whole idea of pedinamento, following the character. This is what Zavattini talked about, theorized. But this is completely different at the same time.
Well, and I would just point out that because there's a way in which, when in the neo-realist camera, the camera follows but disappears because the camera is a humanist insertion in the experience. And here, and this goes against what certain cinematographers will always say, if you notice my work, then I'm not doing my job, because that's the illusionist version of cinema. But that's not Antonioni's version of cinema, because his camera is an active narrating agency that's one of the detectives in the plot.
Absolutely. And and I'm just thinking, a real interesting contrast is with Giuseppe De Santis, the director of Bitter Rice. He makes Roma Ore 11, which is another story ripped from the headlines. It's a bunch of women who respond to an ad for a typist. And they're all lined up all around on the stairs of the building. And they're pushing and shoving because they want to get that job, and because they think that some people are gonna get preferential treatment. And as a consequence, the stairs collapse, people die. And then, we get into the lives of the survivors, for instance. Antonioni ripped from the headlines, but never went there, never went that far. He never gave us all that background. He provided us hints, but they were all external. He wasn't interested in going the way that De Santis did. And mark my words, I mean, that De Santis movie is by far one of the best films that he made, and it's a film that deserves to be seen with subtitle here in the States, because it's hardly ever seen, it's hardly ever shown.
Well, you touch on also one of the reasons we're showing this film, and one of those reasons is some of the major Antonionis are always easily available and are well known. I don't think they're shown as much as they should for American audiences. Antonio's reputation with Americans, given the vast publicity machine that we exist in the 21st century, recedes in that way. As someone like yourself who teaches film history, I get to introduce Antonioni to people because it's not, part of this. Having said that, when you have a film like this, you can look at these aspects that we're now looking at, his narrating camera, and let's talk about for example, the forest, the forest and the importance of the forest. You know the production background to a little bit of that of the French episode. So, this is something he's perpetually going to do with nature.
He's gonna change it. He's going to change nature. He does it all the time, right? I mean, he hasn't done it up until now. This is his second film. But, he gets into a beautiful forest, and what does he do? He has trees torn down. He has leaves recolored. And that's, something that he does in the black and white of I Vinti, but then he will do it regularly with colors in Blow Up and in Red Desert. I mean, Red Desert has a famous scene where there's a street vendor, a fruit vendor, who's selling gray fruit and gray veggies. He literally paints everything gray.
Right.
And there's one sequence where the protagonist wakes up from her escapade, their love affair, and the whole room has gone pink.
Right.
Everything has been repainted. But I mean, painting nature, this is an Antonioni-esque thing.
Yeah. So again, Antonioni, you talked about character and we've talked about camera, but another one of the issues is he's one of the people most interested in architectural space.
Absolutely.
And what that tells us about the modern world and its contradictions. And I think this is a film in which he's very happy to be in three very different cities, but there's that paradox of the continuities within the discontinuities. On the one hand, he wants to respect the differences in the places, but at the same time, he sees certain continuities in the struggle of modernity and of this desire that he can express, in one sense in the same way, because he's so interested in the differences in the architecture, but he's purposing that difference in a certain sense for the same exploration.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, and I think that we also need to bear in mind that he's also playing with difference and sameness in the way that he films these three episodes, because many critics have said that he really is paying respect to cinematic traditions of the plays. So, so the French episode and the British episode, especially the British episode, Losey, the French episode, French cinema of the 30s, there's certainly that sense, but at the level of architecture, it's incredible. I think that, it's the opening of the Italian episode, for instance, shows one of the most beautiful and peculiar neighborhoods in Rome, Il Quartiere Coppedè. And it's really, it's an unicum in Roman architecture. And it speaks immediately
Yes.
to the class status of the protagonists. And, and if this protagonist had been right-wing, an extreme right-wing guy, that would have been very clear. That would have been made very clear. On the other hand, that first episode, to go back also to your earlier question, anticipates the endless walking, the promenade through the city.
Right.
And you will see the different aspects of the city and, the different architecture of the city. What has been destroyed by the war, what is still, very much, what has remained of of classical Roman architecture. In a way, it anticipates both Il Grido and La Notte.
Right.
The British episode is steep with London.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean, and it's a London that crowds you. It's a London that makes the character infinitely small. And after all, the protagonist is infinitely small.
And it's also a portrait of what London really was in the world, and one of the earliest megapolises, in the sense that we then see that he lives at this distance from the city, in his working class environment, in which he's the one who sees the city as the center of celebrity and fame, and the mass media can do this because he lives in nothingness. He lives in the vast margins of the megapolis, and then there in the center is the energy and the things that count.
And death of a man is irrelevant if it's done to seek popularity.
Absolutely.
I mean, he has completely no remorse for having killed a man.
Well, and that's where Antonioni becomes self-referential, you know, about the status of the movies as a popular art form. And while he's never a moralist, he is someone very interested in the ethics of art and what art can be doing. And so there is this, you know, the way in which we are with the journalist, who he's the only person who has the crisis of conscience, not the killer.
Yeah.
Because the killer is truly psychopathic and is incapable of it, is dead inside in that way.
I mean, he really has the what have I done moment, and it's a what have I done moment that reverberates in the acknowledgement of his responsibility when the other journalist says, we're doing the same thing now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, and this is in a way that would have fallen very well with the original idea of the film, and sort of, you know, it's the dangers, the pitfalls that was of the social moment.
Right.
The lack of examples that had been set. I mean, Antonioni was talking about, you know, the fact that originally, you know, if you were youth model their behavior on the elders,
right?
And if there was no model being set, what could we expect of them?
Right.
But it's interesting that, you know, like especially the French episode comes from extensive conversations with kids in academias, for instance, and at universities, and some of these kids are the kids that then he casts for the role.
Well, and that's the way in which he's still attached to certain elements of neorealism. You know, we're going to have to, there's so much more to be said about this, but we've exhausted our designated time, you know,
It
today.
always goes by so fast.
Absolutely, and always a pleasure to have you here. If you've enjoyed today's episode of City Cinematheque, please continue tuning in. We're going to be showing more of post-war Italian cinema. Also, take the opportunity to visit the CUNY TV website, www.cuny.tv. You'll have the opportunity to look at all of the programming at this university's terrific, I think, station. So, www.cuny.tv. Giancarlo, it's been a pleasure to have you here with you just bubble up with knowledge about Antonioni, and we'll have you back to bubble some more in the future.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I'm very happy that you were able to join us here today, and please tune in again in the future for City Cinematheque. It's bye-bye for now.